The first thing May Calder noticed about Wren Academy was how the town pretended it had decided to be civilized. The second thing she noticed was how badly the town wanted to believe that pretending could hold back the wind, the dust, and the hunger beneath every polite conversation. When the wagon crested the rise, the academy showed itself like a promise nailed to rough boards. New timbers still pale in the sun, a porch rail not yet polished by 1,000 hands. Windows glazed enough to catch light and throw it back at anyone who tried to squint through the grime. Behind it stood a scatter of lean-to sheds and a corral that looked more practical than the sermons they posted on the church doors. May sat where the springs complained under her weight, fingers worrying the edge of a faded handkerchief. Her wrists were bruised in the tender ways bruises became visible only after hours of sitting still. She kept her coat sleeves down even as the day warmed, because in a place like this, skin told stories faster than mouths. She had been called many things in her flight. May was the latest. A name did not make a person safe. It only made the danger harder to aim. In the rear of her mind, the memory of her old room in the city's boarding house still came in pieces. Thin lamplight, a ledger's heavy smell of ink, and a man's voice that had told her she could buy time if she paid enough. She had paid with what she had, and still time had run out. Now she rode with a letter tucked inside her bodice, a school hiring note with a seal pressed hard enough to bruise the paper. The letter had been written by Elias Wren, a rancher of some standing who had decided, so the recruiter said, to expand his influence into education. It sounded noble. On paper, it sounded like a man buying the future. In practice, it meant hiring a woman who didn't ask too many questions. May did not ask. Not at first. Her wagon stopped near the porch, where a boy with sun-bleached hair stood holding a bucket as if he might pour it out at any moment. He was too young to be guarding anything, but the frontier made children of everyone who could be put to work. A man stepped down from the boardwalk, hat brim shadowing his eyes. He had the look of a person who measured distance by how tired he became walking it. Elias Wren's gaze landed on May like a weight checking for cracks. "You're Calder?" he asked. His voice was even, but May felt the question underneath it, the one about whether she carried trouble like a hidden patch. "I am," she said. She kept her chin level. The town could read fear in a woman's throat if she let it rise. Elias watched her for another breath, then nodded once. "We're glad you made it. The academy's not big enough to spare mistakes." The boy set down his bucket. He stared at May's boots, the way she kept her balance with the careful economy of someone who had learned not to fall. May climbed down. The boards creaked. Her stomach tightened anyway. Elias offered a hand, not lingering, not too familiar. He looked as if he knew the difference between offering help and claiming ownership. May took it. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. When he released her, the air felt colder for a moment. "Where you best used?" he asked. "Teaching. Arithmetic," May said, because the letter had mentioned sums and lessons and keeping young hands from wandering into trouble. "And helping with the younger ones." Elias's mouth turned briefly, not quite a smile. "We have younger ones whether we want 'em or not." May's eyes moved over the academy's yard. Barrels of water, stacked planks, a rope line strung between posts, a few chalkboards hung inside with careful straps. Someone had tried to make order, and order was already shaking. Behind Elias, the town's main street unfolded in the distance. Smoke from cooking fires drifted low. Somewhere a dog barked once and fell silent, as if even sound cost too much. Elias led her inside. The schoolroom smelled of fresh pine and old sweat clinging to the floorboards. It was too early for dust, but frontier dust arrived anyway, creeping under the corners like a persistent thought. She saw children seated at desks that were still unscarred, their faces curious and suspicious. The girl nearest the window watched May as though May might be a trick. Elias introduced her plainly. "May Calder will help with lessons and keep the place settled." No one clapped. Frontier towns didn't clap for new beginnings. They waited for proof. May set her things down and opened the chalkboard with a practiced hand. She had chalked her own boards in the past, taught in rooms that held fewer windows but more rules. She knew children needed more than instruction. They needed the steady presence of someone who did not panic. That afternoon, she taught long division to boys whose hands were too big for the slates. She corrected their work gently, guiding pencils to the right marks without making them feel stupid. When a boy tried to answer for the thrill of being heard, she let him be right once, just once, so he might remember how good it felt. By sundown, her throat was dry with dust and her fingers smelled faintly of chalk. Elias returned to check on how she worked, bringing a covered tin pail. He did not sit right away. He leaned in the doorway like a man waiting to see if the world would break. "You eat?" he asked. May blinked. She had forgotten how hungry she could be. "Not yet." Elias set the pail down. "Stew, whatever's left by the time I get back." "It smells good," May said. He glanced toward the classroom. The children had been sent to fetch water and straighten boards. Their laughter sounded thin, like laughter in a place that held its breath. Elias's eyes returned to May. "It's not a proper town, Calder. People come and go like wind. But if I can keep some of them here long enough to learn what the world costs, I figure that's my duty." May swallowed. She knew duties. She had lived under other people's sense of duty, the kind that never asked consent. "I can do my part," she said. Elias nodded, then turned away, as though he did not want to intrude on her private determination. Later, after the children were settled with hymn sheets and a story about saints who overcame hardship, May stepped outside. The sky had turned the color of old tin. Stars emerged one by one, reluctant to be seen. Wind pushed through the yard, moving the laundry line as if it were searching for something. May gathered her cloak closer and walked to the well behind the academy. That was when she noticed the man across the street who pretended he was only passing by. He lingered where the shadows were thickest, coat collar raised, hands not quite in his pockets. His gaze moved with intent, tracking her instead of the town. May kept walking because running made you visible. At the well, she filled a bucket, then set it down and pretended to adjust her grip. She felt the man's attention without seeing it clearly, like heat without light. When she turned, she met his eyes. He looked older than Elias, with heavier shoulders and a face marked by too many winters and too few clean sheets. His expression held an amused sharpness, as if he already knew what she feared. "You're the new school help," he called. May did not like the tone. It was the tone of someone who believed they were entitled to answers. "I'm assigned," she replied, "to teach." He smiled, showing a crooked tooth. "Teaching's a fine way to keep a woman busy, ain't it?" May tightened her hand around the bucket handle. She could leave now. She could return inside, close the door, tell Elias someone was watching. But she waited. A lawless town was not only about guns. It was about information, who collected it, who sold it, who used it as a weapon. "What's your business, sir?" May asked. The man tilted his head. "Name's Silas Vane. Folks call me a lot of things. Sometimes it's the ones that matter." He approached slowly. May noticed he avoided the well platform by a careful step, keeping distance as if he knew where trouble tended to gather. "I don't think we've met," May said. Silas chuckled. "No, we ain't met. Not proper." "Then I suggest you keep it that way." The wind carried a laugh from somewhere else in town, distant and careless. Silas's gaze flicked to the academy windows. "Calder," he said softly, as if tasting the name. "You know, sometimes women take new names when the old ones get expensive." May's stomach tightened. She kept her face calm. "I know what I'm hired to do." Silas's smile faded. "Sure. And I know how to read." In the dim light, his eyes gleamed like a knife laid flat. "That's unfortunate," May said. Silas shrugged. "It ain't unfortunate for me." He stepped closer, close enough that May could smell tobacco on him, and something else beneath it, old paper and ink. "There's a record," he said. "I've seen it, in a place where folks don't throw away what they're owed." May held her breath. She wanted to ask what record. She wanted to know how close he was to telling her true past. But Elias had hired her. Elias had vouched for her letter. If Silas reached the wrong conclusion, the wrong people would come with questions. May lowered her voice. If you have information, you can take it to the proper authorities. Silas made a sound that was almost a snort. Authorities? In this town? That's a fancy word for men with pistols and bad tempers. May felt the truth of it in her bones. Elias did not carry a pistol openly, at least not in her view. Yet she had already seen the way he moved, how his hand lingered near his belt when he listened, the way his eyes took inventory of doors and exits. Maybe he was not law. Maybe he was the closest thing they had. Silas leaned in just enough to be cruel. I'd hate for your schoolwork to get interrupted. May met his eyes steadily. Then don't interrupt it. For a moment, Silas looked as if he might take offense, as if May's steadiness had surprised him. Then he straightened and stepped back. We'll see. He turned and walked away toward the main street, coat flapping slightly with the wind. May stood by the well for a long time after he disappeared, letting her heart slow. Her mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps he had heard rumors. Perhaps the letter carried enough of her former details to allow him a path to her old identity. Her past had been a careful stitching of lies. It had held until now. That night, she lay on her mattress in the small room Elias had offered her near the academy office. The floorboards creaked with every small movement in the house. She listened for footsteps. She listened for the distant clatter of town life. When morning arrived, she woke with the taste of dust in her mouth. Elias appeared at her door with a note in his hand. Mail, he said, from the county clerk. May sat up, her hands smoothing the quilt as if she could iron out fear. Elias handed her the note. It says the academy's charter got filed. Says you're recognized as contracted staff. May stared at the paper, at the neat ink and official seal. It was proof, yes, but also a beacon. Official paperwork meant her name was pinned somewhere, and pinned things were easy to pluck. Elias watched her face. You all right? May folded the note slowly. Yes, thank you. She did not trust her voice. Elias hesitated, then looked away as if he were uncomfortable with how much he cared whether she was hurt. We got problems in town, he said at last. A fellow came through last night asking about you. May's stomach sank. Silas? Elias's brows drew together. You know him? I met him at the well, May admitted. Elias's jaw tightened. He's not a man you want owing you questions. May forced herself to breathe evenly. What did he ask? Elias rubbed the bridge of his nose. He asked how long you planned to stay. Asked it like it was a joke. Asked it like he wanted to measure your nerves. May stared at him. Elias had heard the tone. Elias had noticed. It made her worry more because it meant he had been paying close attention, close enough to become attached, close enough to risk his protection for her. And she did not know whether she deserved it. Then he'll be told what he wants, May said carefully, by my contract. Elias's gaze held hers. Contracts don't stop bullets, but they can slow the ones that come for you. May's throat tightened again. Elias left her then to prepare the classroom schedule. May took the morning lesson seriously, but her mind drifted like a horse with a loose bit. She watched children's faces for signs that the town had already decided on her fate. At noon, a bell rang. A simple thing, a metal strike from the church. It called children inside and told adults that someone had arrived who mattered. A wagon pulled into view bearing men from farther out. Silas Vane emerged with them, smiling as if he were the host and May the entertainment. Elias met the newcomers at the yard gate. May watched from the classroom window, hands stilling on a page of arithmetic problems. The men's clothing was traveling worn, but not frontier thin. Their boots were too clean, their hats too deliberate. Not cattle rustlers, she thought, at least not the ordinary kind. When the newcomers approached, One of them, a man with a heavy mustache and a star-shaped badge on his vest, spoke with practiced authority. "We received notice of a clerk matter," he said. Elias stepped forward. "This is Wren Academy. We mind school and keep children from the road." The mustached man's eyes moved toward the building. The woman inside, May Calder. May's blood chilled. Elias's posture shifted slightly, the way it had the first day he'd watched her when he didn't know her story. "Contract staff," Elias repeated. The mustached man nodded slowly. "Not questioning her right to teach, only her right to use the name." Silas chuckled from behind, leaning like a man at the edge of a stage. May opened the classroom door and stepped onto the porch. She saw the men's faces clearly now. The badge wasn't a town badge. It was county, the kind that carried enough weight to scare people into silence. May had expected trouble. She had not expected the county to play messenger. "I don't understand," May said, holding her voice steady. The mustached man tipped his hat. "Miss Calder, we have record of an earlier identity associated with certain deaths and an alleged incident involving an affidavit." May's fingers tightened on the porch rail. "I am contracted under this name," she said. "If the clerk is concerned, let him address it through official channels." Elias's eyes flicked to her. There was protectiveness there, but also a question. How deep did her trouble run? The mustached man's gaze sharpened. "You left under changed circumstances. A man named for the incident is still in the area." Silas's smile widened. May realized then that Silas wasn't merely threatening her with knowledge, he was guiding the right people to the right moment. Elias stepped closer to May, placing himself between her and the county man without raising his voice. "You're in my yard," Elias said. "You do your business without making my school look like a courthouse. If you got claims, put 'em in writing." The county man's expression soured. "Ranchers like you like to act noble, but noble men still let their hands get tied." May felt a surge of anger, unexpected and bright. Elias wasn't a noble man trying to buy virtue. He was a man building something in a town that stole from everyone who paused long enough to believe in tomorrow. She stepped forward again. "If there's a record," May said, "then read it aloud." The mustached man blinked. He didn't expect her to challenge him in public. May's gaze moved to the badge on his vest. "Speak. Let the town hear what you claim." Silas shifted, annoyed. Elias watched May like he was learning her again. The county man sighed and motioned for a clerk's document. A younger fellow in the group produced paper from a satchel. The county man read names and dates with the flat voice of a man who believed repetition made it true. May kept her face still. But the more he said, the more she felt the world tilt toward a memory she had tried to drown. He read an earlier name, one May had not spoken in years. He said a location she had fled. He said that the woman under that name had testified under pressure, that an affidavit had been altered, that someone's property had been seized afterward. It wasn't exactly a crime May could deny. It was worse than that. It meant someone had used her fear as ink. May looked at Silas. Silas raised his hands slightly, palms out, as if he were protesting innocence. "Now, see? I told you. I knew she'd crack." Elias's eyes narrowed on Silas. May's heart pounded, but her mind calmed into a strange clarity. A frontier town might not have courts that worked, but it had ears. It had rumors, and rumors could be weapon or shield. May chose shield. "If my affidavit was altered," she said, voice carrying without shouting, "then that means someone forged my signature or coerced it. That means the wrong people blamed me." The mustached man frowned. "That's not for you to decide." May's eyes flashed. "It's for the record. If you got the record, then you have the man's name who altered it." The county man hesitated, just a fraction. Silas's smile faltered. Elias took a step, slow but firm. "Who's the man?" he demanded. The air went tight. The mustached man's voice turned cautious. "There's mention of a clerk." May interrupted because she could feel the rope around her neck tightening, and she refused to let it finish tightening. "Not a clerk," she said. "A ranch hand. A man who knew how to ride into other men's affairs. A man who visited the boarding house at night and called himself by other names." Silas's face drained of color. May's breath came shallow. She had remembered something earlier but refused to name it because naming it made it real. Now it was real. The mustached man looked from May to Silas. Silas snapped quick and cruel. "She's lying!" May stared at him. "You forged the affidavit." Silas laughed again, but it sounded wrong now, too high, too desperate. "I ain't got no penmanship worth stealing." Elias's voice dropped low. "But you got the know-how. You got the ink smell. You got the way you read records in the dark like you enjoy it." Silas took a step back. He was trying to regain control of the crowd, but people in lawless towns loved a villain more than they loved a victim. They leaned closer. The county man cleared his throat, attempting to retake authority. "Miss, we can't adjudicate this on a porch." May swallowed. "Then you should arrest the man who did it, or at least take him in for questioning." Silas's eyes darted toward the gathered men in the street, men who had come to watch the academy because they wanted to feel better about their own lives. Those men might also be bought with the promise of drama. Silas reached into his coat. Elias moved instantly. Not with a gun drawn. May realized Elias carried himself like a man who didn't need to shoot to survive, but his hand still went toward his belt with a practiced certainty. The county men stiffened. Silas pulled out a small folded paper instead of a pistol. A warrant? A note? May didn't know. He tossed it toward Elias. Elias caught it with one hand and glanced down. The county man's face hardened as he looked over. May watched Elias read. He looked up slowly. In his eyes there was shock that moved into something like grief. "What is it?" May asked. Elias's voice came out rough. "They ain't come for your crime. They come for your witness." May felt the words land like a bullet because she understood them. Silas had not simply threatened her. Silas had sold a story about her past to someone who could use her. And the county man's hesitation earlier had been the moment he realized May wasn't the powerless woman they expected. Elias turned the paper so May could read the printed line. It was an order, an affidavit request, a summons for a specific testimony. The county sought May's signature again for a case that hadn't been closed. But the letter didn't refer to May Calder. It referred to her earlier name, a name she had not told Elias, a name she had tried to bury. May's mouth went dry. "They want me to sign something?" The mustached man nodded once. "You can clear your name, miss, if you comply. If you refuse, you'll be treated as a fugitive using false identity." May looked at Elias. Elias looked back. And May finally saw the trap, the twist, the subversion she had not considered. She had thought her past would destroy her by bringing a killer to her door. Instead, her past was being used as leverage to drag Elias into the open. Because Elias's academy, Elias's ranch influence, had put him on the map of men with paper power. If Elias refused to cooperate, he would appear complicit. If Elias complied, he would tie himself to a woman whose past might make him a target. May saw it with a tenderness she didn't expect from herself. Someone had planned this, and Silas had become their messenger. May's voice steadied. "If I sign, it will be under coercion." The county man's expression sharpened. "Coercion isn't in the paperwork." Silas shifted, trying to look relieved that he still held the crowd's attention. "See? She's trouble. She won't do what she's told." Elias stepped toward the county men, his voice firm. "You ain't taking her today," Elias said. The mustached man's jaw tightened. "This is official." Elias's eyes did not waver. "Then put it on paper that don't smell like a bribe." For a moment the street went silent. Even wind seemed to pause, dragging dust across the plank boards like a slow breath. May understood something then about Elias. He wasn't only protecting her, He was protecting the Academy's fragile belief that law could be made where law didn't exist. And she, fleeing her past, had been hired to preserve that belief. But the town's moral complexity was not a storybook. It was a trap made of hungry men and official stamps. May stepped closer to Elias. She put her hand over the paper order covering the printed earlier name. "I will not be taken like a carded sack," she said. The countyman's eyes narrowed. "Then you leave us no choice." Silas's smile returned, too bright. "Arrest her." May felt the moment tighten into a decision. If she protested, she risked being seized anyway. If she complied, she risked signing away not only herself, but the truth about what happened years ago. And if she tried to fight, she would turn the Academy into a battleground. May chose the third option, the one nobody expected. She smiled faintly. Then she asked, "How many days?" The mustached man blinked. "Days?" May nodded. "How many days before you can bring a marshal and enforce this order?" The countyman looked to his subordinate, who checked a ledger or pocket watch with the distracted air of a man who preferred certainty. "3," the subordinate said. 3. May turned toward the porch and the open doorway where children waited behind her, peering like small birds. She glanced at the chalkboard through the window. She imagined a different kind of education, not sums, but survival. May faced the countyman again. 3 days. I'll gather the witnesses you claim are needed." The mustached man's eyes narrowed. "You can't gather witnesses in 3 days." May met his gaze. "Try me." Elias's eyes widened a fraction. He understood her plan even if he didn't know the details. He stepped close enough that only May would hear. "What are you doing?" Elias asked quietly. May's voice dropped. "Forcing them to show their hand." Elias frowned. "That order says you must comply." May shook her head. "It says comply or be treated as a fugitive. But if I appear voluntarily with witnesses, if I sign under daylight with a town full of witnesses, they'll have to explain who coerced me." Elias's face tightened. "And if they don't?" May glanced at Silas, who watched with too much hunger. "Then I know exactly who to trust." The countyman looked annoyed at being manipulated. "Fine, 3 days, but don't think you're clever." May turned her palms up, not in surrender, but in calm. "I'm just not easy to steal." The countymen departed, horses stamping and clods of dust rising like smoke. The street resumed murmuring, men talking too loud about the Academy's scandal. Silas stayed behind, shoulders squared, eyes bright with plans. He walked toward May like a man approaching a locked door. "You really think you can beat me with witnesses?" he said. May tilted her head. "I don't need to beat you. I just need to make you answer." Silas's smile sharpened. "Answer what?" May looked past him at Elias. Elias stood at May's side, not touching her, but anchoring her presence in the open air. May chose honesty because she could not afford more lies if she wanted love to survive. "My past included a woman," May said softly. "A woman named Ruthie Hart. She kept a scrap ledger. She wrote down the dates and the names. She saw your hand on the paper." Silas's smile faltered again. May continued before he could recover. "She lives near the river flats, in a place where no one thinks to look unless they're hunting for truth." Silas's eyes flicked sharply toward Elias, then back to May. "You don't know that." May's voice steadied. "I know it. I just didn't want you to know I knew." Elias's gaze held May's, and something in it changed. Not suspicion, recognition. Elias had hired a stranger. He had expected a quiet helper. But May's sudden command of her own story made her no longer a tool. She was a partner to something dangerous. That night, Elias did not sleep. He walked the academy yard with a lantern, checking doors, speaking softly to the children and instructing the older boys to stand watch in pairs. May moved around the classroom as if she belonged to it, setting out extra chalk, tying up notebooks, drawing maps for the math lessons because maps helped her mind stay disciplined. Between tasks, she and Elias spoke in fragments. "You plan to run again," Elias said at last. May looked up from her work. The lamplight warmed the side of her face. "I plan to survive," May corrected. Elias sighed. "I can't tell if I'm grateful you didn't run today, or angry." May's mouth curved faintly. "Maybe both." Elias came closer. His boots creaked. He stood in the doorway of the office room, lantern casting amber light on his scar. "If you're hunted," he said, voice low, "why did you come here?" May swallowed. She could have told him it was the letter, the need for work, the promise of stability. Instead, she told him what was true in its ugly simplicity. "Because I got tired of being afraid," she said. "I thought, maybe if I taught children to count, I could count my own life and find enough left to live." Elias's eyes softened. "Frontier women don't get enough left," he said. "Not unless someone makes room." May felt warmth rise in her chest, unwelcome and tender, but she kept her hands busy so she wouldn't reach for him. Reaching, in a place like this, made you vulnerable. On the first day of the 3, May and Elias traveled toward the river flats with supplies in a wagon and 2 riding horses led behind. Elias insisted on going because he said he couldn't trust the roads to be safe for a woman on her own. May let him insist. As they rode, dust rose and settled on their clothing, collecting in the seams like time. May watched the landscape, low scrub, thorn bushes, distant windmills turning lazily against a sky too wide to feel kind. In places, the ground dipped with old trails. In others, it rose in rocky ridges where men had likely died quietly. Elias drove the conversation carefully, as if he were afraid May might disappear if he asked too much. "What did the city do to you?" he asked at last. May glanced at him. "Took everything it could. Then it asked for more." Elias's jaw tightened. "And you took new work instead of trouble." May shook her head. "I took new work because trouble follows people who wait." They came upon the river flats by late afternoon. The area smelled of wet earth and old reeds, a contrast to the dry town air. A small cluster of cabins sat where the floodplain stayed quiet. Smoke rose from cooking fires. They approached a cabin with a sagging porch. May's heart hammered as if she were riding toward a confession. A woman stepped out, hair gray with age, hands marked by work and time, face sharp but not unkind. "Who's there?" the woman called. May drew a breath. "Ruthie Hart." The woman paused. Recognition stirred in her eyes like a match catching. "You're the school helper," Ruthie said slowly. May nodded once. Ruthie's gaze flicked to Elias. "He with you?" May answered carefully. "Yes." Ruthie studied Elias as if deciding whether his presence was protection or threat. Then she stepped back into the cabin. "Come in before the sun goes mean." Inside, the cabin smelled of dried herbs and ink. A desk stood near the window, and on it lay a ledger bound with twine. May's breath caught. "That's the book," May whispered. Ruthie's eyes narrowed. "You know what it holds." May sat slowly, hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. "I know you wrote down what happened." Ruthie took a seat across from her, the ledger between them like a third person. "I wrote because I didn't want lies to win." Elias's posture shifted forward. "We need it," he said, "for a county case, to stop what's been done wrong." Ruthie's laughter was quiet. "County cases don't stop wrong. They just decide who's allowed to speak." May swallowed. "Then we'll let the record speak." Ruthie opened the ledger. The pages held neat handwriting, dates, and names, some of them already crossed out by someone who knew the danger of leaving ink visible. May recognized one line. The altered affidavit, the night it was coerced, the man who stood too close to her in the boarding house. Silas's name appeared next to the entry. May's eyes burned. Elias stared at the ledger as if he were reading proof of a storm coming. Ruthie tapped the page with a finger. He came here years ago, asking questions like he was buying truth. But he wasn't buying, he was collecting. May leaned forward. Will you testify? Ruthie hesitated. The lawless world lived in her nerves. I'll testify when I see daylight, Ruthie said finally. Not when some man decides my mouth is a bargaining chip. Elias nodded firmly. Then we'll bring daylight. May's throat tightened with gratitude so fierce it felt like pain. Ruthie packed the ledger in a cloth bag. May helped her tie it securely. She did it with hands that were careful, not because she was gentle, but because she was terrified of dropping proof that might keep her alive. They left before evening fully settled, because in frontier towns, even help could become a target. On the second day, May and Elias returned to Wren Academy with Ruthie hidden in a wagon under blankets of oats and spare cloth. Elias drove with the urgency of a man crossing a river without knowing if the bottom would hold. When they arrived back, Silas was waiting near the saloon. He walked toward them as if he had been born into the town's worst habits. Look what the wind dragged back, he said. May's eyes stayed forward. She did not want to show fear, but Silas's smile told her he had already imagined how he would ruin her. Elias stepped between May and the saloon door. She's working, he said. Silas's gaze moved past Elias toward the wagon. And who's in that wagon? May's pulse jumped. Elias kept his voice steady. No one you're owed. Silas laughed. Owings are the only thing I understand. May felt her temper spark. She stepped forward then, surprising even herself. You forged the affidavit, May said, voice clear enough to carry. You used me as ink. You sold my fear. Silas's smile wavered, then returned. You can say whatever you want. Words don't pull levers. Paper does. May lifted her chin toward the wagon. Then you should fear paper. Silas's eyes narrowed. Paper you ain't got. May's heart beat hard. She could feel Ruthie watching from under the blanket unseen. May reached into her dress and pulled out the hiring letter Elias had first given her, then another folded scrap from inside her bodice, the earlier name line she'd copied from the summons when she'd thought no one was watching. She held the scraps like they were weapons. Silas sneered. That proves nothing. May's voice turned softer, more dangerous because it sounded calm. It proves you came to the well and threatened me. It proves you knew there'd be an order. It proves you're not just a stranger, you're a broker. Silas's face reddened. From the academy, townspeople began drifting closer. A man with a hat tipped low, a woman holding a child, a few older men who had once been soldiers and still carried their instincts like coins. Frontier crowds didn't gather for truth. They gathered for the feeling of witnessing someone fall. May decided to deny Silas that feeling. She invited them. Come see, May said, louder now. You want the story? Here's the story. Elias's gaze snapped to hers, startled. May held his look for a breath, silently asking him to trust her. Elias nodded once, slow. Because love on the frontier was not always gentle. Sometimes it was a man stepping into danger beside a woman choosing her own voice. Ruthie was brought out after 2 minutes, the cloth bag lifted like a flag. The crowd's murmuring intensified. People recognized the shape of a ledger. People recognized the kind of silence that followed evidence. Silas's smirk disappeared entirely. The county mustached man arrived again that afternoon with a younger marshal this time. He looked annoyed to be summoned into a crowd's drama. But he also looked like a man who had promised his superiors he would regain control. He approached the porch of the academy, badge glinting. This gathering is unnecessary, he snapped. May stepped forward. Then speak quickly. The mustached man looked at Ruthie. You have documents? Ruthie lifted the ledger. I do. The county man turned to May. Will you comply now? May's hands steadied around the summons paper. I will sign, she said, but not the way you want. Elias's eyes widened. May continued, I will sign in front of witnesses. I will correct the record based on Ruthie's ledger. I will name the man who forged the affidavit and coerced my testimony. Silas's face went pale. The mustached man's expression tightened with worry. This was not how the case was supposed to go. He could force a confession in private. He couldn't easily control a crowd that wanted to hear a villain's name. Careful, he warned May. May met his gaze. I've been careful for years. Then she looked at Silas. You knew my old name, May said, voice breaking just a little, because you were there when it was taken. Silas's mouth opened. No words came out. The crowd held its breath. Ruthie stepped forward, tapping the ledger page. The ink on the affidavit is the same iron gall tint used in this man's copies. The date matches his arrival, and the signature was written under pressure. The mustached man's subordinate checked details like a man trying to find a way out of a trap. Elias stood beside May, his hand hovering near her elbow without claiming it. May realized then that Elias would not try to make her into a saint. He would not try to hide her past behind his shelter. He would stand beside her while she faced it. That was what love looked like on the frontier. Less romance, more courage. The mustached man finally nodded toward the marshal. Arrest Silas Vane for interference and alleged forgery. Silas let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. You can't. He tried to move. The marshal grabbed him. Silas fought, but frontier justice was not clean. It was simply loud. Men who wanted the sensation of punishment helped pin him down. The county man's voice turned sharp. This isn't a show. But May could hear the truth beneath it. It was a show now. Silas had planned to make her the show. She had turned the stage back toward him. Afterward, the academy felt different, as if sunlight had moved through the boards. Children wandered out cautiously, drawn by the calm that followed drama. Someone fetched water and offered it to the marshal as if the world might still need kindness. Elias walked with May behind the schoolhouse where the sun warmed the dirt. Silas would be taken away and questioned. Maybe the county case would drag on. Maybe other men would find new ways to use May's past, but in that moment, she had regained something. Not innocence, agency. May looked at Elias, and the tenderness that sneaked up on you was suddenly undeniable. You hired me without knowing, she said. Elias exhaled. I hired you because you looked like you wouldn't break. May swallowed. I did break. I just kept moving. Elias's eyes softened again, his voice low. Then I'm glad I saw you moving instead of pretending you weren't human. May looked down at her hands, at the faint burn mark on her right forearm, at the chalk dust and stew dust and dried ink that clung stubbornly to skin. You'll lose something, she said, afraid that her love might become a liability. Because I'm not safe. Elias took a step closer. The wind lifted his hat brim. He studied her face as if reading a letter he had only just begun. May, he said, voice quiet, no one is safe in this country. The only difference is whether we pretend we are. May met his gaze. And you? She asked. Elias smiled faintly. I was a drifter in my own way before I built something. I thought building was enough. May felt her breath catch. And is it? She asked. Elias lifted his hand, slow enough that she could pull away if she wanted. He brushed his knuckles lightly over her cheek, not claiming but comforting. It was never enough, he said. Not until you came. May's throat tightened. She wanted to believe the sentence fully because believing made her want to risk more than survival. But survival had made her careful. So she asked the only question that mattered. What do you want from me? Elias's eyes held hers. I want you to stay. May blinked. I can't promise the past won't come back. Elias nodded. And I won't promise love will make bullets harmless. The air shifted, heavy with the quiet honesty of two people finally refusing to dress fear in pretty words. But I can promise this, Elias said. I'll keep building a place where you can breathe. And if your past tries to drag you away again, we'll meet it together. May's eyes stung. She let herself lean forward just enough that her forehead touched his chest. His heart beat strong under his shirt, steady like a drum in a hard land. "I didn't think anyone would choose me," May whispered. Elias's hand moved to the back of her braid, gentle as if he were holding something fragile. "I didn't choose you because you were perfect. I chose you because you were real, and you kept giving real to children who don't know yet how mean life can be." May closed her eyes. She thought of the city's boarding house. She thought of the forced affidavit. She thought of Ruthie's ledger and the ink that refused to wash away. Then she thought of Elias standing in front of the porch, refusing to let the county men make her helpless. And she felt a tenderness that didn't ask permission. She felt love begin, slow and sun-worn, like a blanket laid over a frightened body. The next morning, the academy resumed its lessons. May taught arithmetic with steadier hands. She taught the youngest children letter shapes by candlelight. She and Ruthie shared stories of survival that didn't romanticize it, only honored it. Elias made sure Silas's name wasn't spoken with the same laughter people used for gossip. He didn't silence people. He simply made sure the town remembered that consequences existed. In the late afternoon, May stepped onto the academy porch with a satchel in her hands. Elias met her near the gate with a tool belt and a quiet look. "Ruthie's going to need help keeping the ledger safe," Elias said. May nodded. "I can bring extra supplies." Elias's gaze warmed. "Come back with me for supper after." May's heart gave a small, hopeful lurch. "Do you mean it?" she asked. Elias smiled faintly. "I mean it." May walked with him toward the ranch road, leaving the classroom behind. She felt the dust swirl around her boots. She felt the wind tug at her shawl. And she felt for the first time in years that her life was not only a flight, it was a direction. Elias opened the gate to his ranch-side yard where the air smelled of hay and wood smoke. A lantern burned near the table. He pulled out 2 tin plates as if he had already decided to make a future common instead of private. May sat, hands still dusted chalk white. Elias poured stew into her plate. They ate without rushing, letting the frontier quiet settle between them. When May looked up, Elias's eyes were gentle. "What name will you be now?" he asked softly. May's breath caught. She had carried a borrowed name long enough to turn it into armor. She could return to the name she'd fled. Or she could keep May Calder, the name she'd earned by teaching children and standing in daylight. May answered in the only way that mattered. "I'll be whoever stays," she said. Elias's smile spread slowly like sunrise over wide sky. "And I'll be whoever builds," he replied. May reached across the table then, finally letting her fingers find his rough hand. His skin was warm, real, present. Outside, the town wind rattled the loose boards of the academy behind them, but inside the ranch's humble shelter, tenderness held. Not because the frontier became kind, because May and Elias chose each other anyway, after the reveal, after the moral ugliness, after the paper and the threats and the danger meant to separate them. Their romance wasn't a promise of safety, it was a promise of staying. And in the hard country where everyone expected women to run, May Calder did the unexpected. She stayed.